This video will prepare you for both subtests in the NES Elementary Education Exam. If you want to guarantee you'll pass, check out our full-length study guide here or in the description below. Let's get into it.
This video is going to prepare you for Subtest I of the NES Elementary Education Exam. We'll go over a key concept for each competency, and this is some stuff that you're really going to need to know for your exam. We'll start with the biggest domain, reading and English language arts. The first competency is language development and emergent literacy. This competency covers how young students build oral language skills, as well as concepts of print and the alphabetic principle. One of the most important things to know is the difference between phonological and phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is essentially a subcategory of phonological awareness. Phonological awareness encompasses the ability to recognize individual phonemes, syllables, and words. Phonemic awareness is the ability to hear and use individual units of sound or phonemes. Phonological and phonemic awareness are strong predictors of reading success. Students need explicit, direct instruction to develop these skills. So you'll probably be asked about some strategies you can use to teach phonological and phonemic awareness skills. Need some ideas? The 240 study guide has plenty, and luckily for you, I'm going to show you one. L. Conan boxes. Now you may have heard these called sound boxes as well, but you can use these for all types of things. For phonemic awareness, they can be used for isolating and segmenting phonemes. As students say the word, they can move a token into the box for each sound they hear. Once students are able to work with sounds and words, they're ready to connect those sounds to their symbols. Which brings us to our second competency. Competency 2 is phonics, word analysis, spelling, and fluency. There is a lot wrapped up into this competency, including all the strategies and skills students use to decode and encode words on their own when reading and writing. For now, I'm going to focus on the fluency part. Reading fluency is measured by 3 primary criteria. Accuracy, which is the reader's ability to correctly pronounce words, prosody, or the ability to convey expression, and speed, the pace at which the reader reads the text. And you also need to know some strategies for supporting fluent reading. The right methods will depend on the component of fluency a student is struggling with, but in general, it's important to make sure they're reading at their current level, and that they have lots of opportunities to read out loud. One of the best things teachers can do to help students develop fluency is model fluent reading. When reading to a class, use an appropriate rate and expression in your voice. It is also powerful to read a snippet without fluency, such as reading too fast or slow in a robotic voice, to help students fully hear the difference between fluent and non-fluent reading. So let's give it a try. Yes, said Sarah, only 2 more days until my birthday. Or, yes, said Sarah, only 2 more days until my birthday. Okay, students, which one of those sounded more fluent? The third competency in Domain 1 is comprehension and vocabulary. This covers the different kinds of comprehension and strategies for promoting students' comprehension skills. It also includes techniques for developing students' vocabulary, which is where we're going to focus in this video. Vocabulary development refers to students' abilities to effectively know and use words in their listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Effective vocabulary development promotes comprehension and overall reading success. Often, vocabulary is learned indirectly, but sometimes you need to teach new words directly. One way to do this is to pre-teach unfamiliar vocabulary from a text before asking students to read it. Teachers should provide ways to actively engage students with their new vocabulary and help them understand the relationships between words. A great way to do this is by using semantic maps or word webs, like this one, comparing the homophones aisle and aisle. You can use semantic maps to visually display the meaning-based connections between a word or phrase and a set of related words or concepts. You'll need to know the different kinds of semantic relationships. Now, if you need to brush up on any of the differences between homonyms, homographs, or homophones, we've got you covered in our 240 study guide. Ready for the next competency? Let's jump in. The fourth competency, types of text, covers the characteristics of literary genres as well as the features of types of text such as persuasive. Basically, you need to be able to thoroughly understand and analyze these texts before you can teach them to your students. Part of analyzing texts across genres is understanding different types of figurative language and how they are used. There's a ton of different types of figurative language that you'll need to know for your exam, but for now, let's zoom in on 2 of those. First, symbolism. Symbolism is when an object stands for an idea or larger meaning. It's usually used numerous times throughout a piece of literature. Examples would be a dove standing for peace or a snake symbolizing evil. The next one I'll point out is metaphor. That's when an author compares an object or action to something else when it's not literally applicable. Like, life is a roller coaster, or my dad is a sturdy oak, or this video is a lifesaver and Terry is an angel. And remember, a metaphor is a direct comparison, while a simile is a comparison that uses like or as. So those are just 2 examples of figurative language that might come up on your exam. To review all the others on the list, be sure to check out the 240 study guide. Just 1 competency left in Domain 1. Let's get to it. In the written and oral communication competency, you'll need to know the stages of the writing process, modes of communication, and proper conventions. I'm going to give you some tips on conventions because they're likely to come up on your test and they can be pretty tricky. Conventions are necessary for writing and speaking to be clear and understandable. They include grammar, spelling, capitalization, and punctuation. A big one to know is subject-verb agreement. Present tense verbs should match their subjects in number. Singular subjects use one form of the verb, while plural subjects use another. This can be especially tricky for students when indefinite pronouns are the subject of a sentence. For example, everyone, an indefinite pronoun, sounds like it would be plural because multiple people are implied, but it is actually defined as a singular word and would take a singular verb. On your exam, you might be asked to identify an error in subject-verb agreement in a given sentence. That's it. We finished Domain 1. High five. Now you're ready for Domain 2. So let's shift gears from language arts to social studies. The first competency in the social studies domain covers government and economics. Whoa, those are definitely 2 big important pieces of the social studies pie. Now, while I can't cover every concept of government and economics, I'm going to zoom in on one that's going to be essential for you to know for your exam. And remember, if you want even more, subscribe to the 240 study guides. We'll cover all you need to know for government and economics, plus anything else you need to know to be confident for your exam. But right now, let's get into the structure and function of the federal government. I have just a thing to show you. Let's take a sneak peek inside our study guide.
Articles 1, 2, and 3 focus on establishing and separating power in the government. By explicitly separating the government into 3 branches, the Constitution is able to keep any one branch or person in a branch from becoming too powerful. Let's discuss these 2 concepts more. In order to protect from corruption and a dangerous concentration of power, the Constitution separates the various powers of government into 3 distinct branches. The legislative branch makes laws, the executive branch enforces laws, and the judicial branch interprets the meaning of laws. This describes the separation of powers. To further protect against tyranny, each branch has the power to limit the power of the other 2 branches. For example, the judicial branch can check the legislative branch by declaring laws they pass as unconstitutional. This limiting is known as checks and balances.
Now that preview was just a tip of the iceberg. We're so confident in our study guides, we offer a money-back guarantee. Now let's slide over and see what the next competency is all about. Competency 7 covers US and world history. You'll need to know about significant eras and people throughout history, as well as social and political development, in addition to the processes that have shaped the patterns of human population. Characteristics of past civilizations will come up on your exam too. So let's touch on the Fertile Crescent. Many of the most notable ancient civilizations developed in the Fertile Crescent. This is the area extending from the Persian Gulf to the southern coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and it continues from the southern coast of the Mediterranean around to the northern Nile River. This region included the Nile, Tigris, and Euphrates rivers, which provided water and generated fertile soil. The because the region was so fertile, it was conducive to agriculture. Therefore, societies were able to shift from hunter-gatherer to sedentary communities. The Fertile Crescent is considered the cradle of civilization because it was the birthplace of agriculture, urbanization, writing, trade, science, history, and organized religion. The Fertile Crescent includes the Mesopotamia region and ancient Egypt. Civilizations in the Fertile Crescent contributed to the world culture and were responsible for the development of Western civilization. Examples are Egyptians, Sumerians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and Phoenicians. We've got plenty more where that came from in our study guides, but right now, let's dive into our last competency. Competency 8 is all about geography and inquiry. This covers human and physical geography as well as working with visual tools such as charts and maps. So let's talk about maps right now. Both maps and globes use a compass rose, which indicates the 4 cardinal directions north, south, east, and west to orient the viewer. Maps and globes also use legends or keys to explain the symbols found on the map or globe. The legend often contains the scale, which explains the relationship between drawn distance and the distance in real life. If you need to interpret a map, pay careful attention to any scale or legend provided. We'll have some practice with this in just a bit because it's question time. Let's start back at the beginning with Domain 1, which is Reading and English Language Arts. Now let's look at a question about language development and emergent literacy. Which of the following students is demonstrating phonemic awareness? A student who can identify the number of words in a sentence that is read aloud, a student who can listen to the word sit read aloud and identify the first soundists, a student who recognizes that happiness contains 3 syllables, or a student who is asked to name a rhyming word for sweep and says heap. This is the correct answer. The feedback feature in the 240 study guide tells us that phonemic awareness is the ability to identify individual sounds in a word, like knowing sit begins with the sound s. All other choices would fall under phonological awareness. Alright, let's try a question about fluency. Which of the following activities will best support students' work to improve their reading prosody? Participating in choral reading, reading independently, performing time reading with a partner, participating in frequent formal reading fluency assessments. The right answer is choral reading, because the students will hear fluency modeled by the teacher and also receive the benefits of both rereading a text and reading aloud. Alright, for the next one, let's check out what one of those vocabulary questions might look like. Miss Ader reads a book aloud to her students. She introduces unfamiliar words during the reading and wants to promote the students' vocabulary development after the reading. Which of the following activities will best support Miss Ader's goal? Write the unfamiliar words on the board and have students use a dictionary to define the words. Have students draw a picture that illustrates the definitions of unfamiliar words. Reward students who use the words in class. Have the students read the story silently and write down any words that are unfamiliar. This is the right answer because it allows the students to think of a word in various contexts and scaffold the word into their existing vocabulary. Now for the next course, I will be serving types of text with the side of figurative language. Bon appetit. Which of the following is an example of a hyperbole? Now I know hyperbole wasn't one of the terms on the list earlier, but let's still give it our best shot. The sun smiled down on us as we walked to school. The test tomorrow hung over me like a black cloud. The turtle swam silently and slowly through the water. The line for the sail was 2 miles long. Now I'm gonna go with A. That may be a mistake. The question feedback feature in the 240 app showed me that that one's actually an example of personification. This is actually the correct answer. Hyperbole is exaggeration. Remember when I said I might have a question about subject-verb agreement? Well, here it is. Which of the following sentences is grammatically correct? Each one of the kids brought a lunch to the field trip yesterday. Jasmine, Taylor, Mason, Thomas on the field trip tomorrow. 2 or more kids brings a lunch for the field trip tomorrow. The teacher asked for the kids to bring lunches for the field trip. Did you see which one has a subject and verb that are used in agreement? Yep, it's this one. Domain 1, done. Let's keep it moving on to domain 2. Now we got a preview earlier of types of information you'll need to know to answer government questions, but let's take a look at how economics will come up on the test. In economics, the need to make choices arises due to opportunity costs, scarcity, producers, or consumers. Scarcity is the correct answer. If goods were not scarce, prices would be very low and we'd be able to buy them all. But since they are, consumers and producers need to make choices on how they spend their money. Let's look at one about history. We'll stick with that ancient civilization theme that we touched on earlier. Which of the following contributed to the Egyptian civilization's comparative success during the Bronze Age? This is the one we want. Consistent, predictable access to water helped ensure adequate food for Egyptians. Now, social studies exam pro tip. Water is a big deal. All right, one more. Remember when I told you we practice answering a question about a map? That time is here. What amount of beach in kilometers does not have a reef? Notice that this map has a scale included. The perimeter of the island has a blue line around it labeled reef, except for the left side near Alofi. This region is about the same length of the scale marker, which is 6 kilometers. So a 6 kilometer long stretch of beach near Alofi has no reef. And that's it. We've had a practice questions for every competency on the exam. Congrats on finishing the video. If you liked it, give us a like. There's still plenty more to learn. This video is going to prepare you for Subtest II of the NES Elementary Education Exam, which is test code 103. We're going to go over a key concept from each competency. Now these are going to be essential to what you need to know in your exam. Let's start with the biggest domain, math. The first competency is numeration, number sense, and mathematical operations. This competency covers how students represent and combine numbers. One of the most important things to know for the first competency is place value. That means you'll need to understand a place value chart like this one, and the value each digit within a larger number holds. For example, the digit 7 appears in each of the 3 numbers, but it holds a different value in each. In 5,237, 7 is in the ones place and has a value of 7. In 7,852, 7 is in the thousands place and has a value of 7,000. And in 82 and 47 thousandths, 7 is in the thousands place and has a value of 0.007. And here's a tip. Pay super close attention to the ending of these words. It's really easy to make a mistake between thousands and thousandths. You'll probably be asked to take decimals and turn them into fractions or vice versa. And they may even get a little fancy and throw some percent conversions in there too. Need help with any of that? That's what the 240 study guide is for. Want me to show you a little sneak peek? I thought so. Here's a handy graphic from the study guide that helps you convert between fractions, percents, and decimals. Have a fraction and need a percent? Divide the top number by the bottom, multiply by 100, and add a percent sign. Now that's one competency down, so let's move on to competency 2. Competency 2 is mathematical reasoning and problem solving, communication and representation, and data analysis. There's a lot included in this competency. Each of these topics can be its own chapter in a math textbook. For now, we're going to focus on the data part. You'll likely be given data in a table or chart and asked to interpret it, or you might be asked to do something with the data. For example, you might be asked to work with the measures of central tendency. Now they tend to make up a central part of this part of the test. Am I right? Just me? Now if you're given a data set, you'll need to know how to calculate the mean, median, mode, and range. Let's take a look at how these are explained in our study guide.
5 students have their heights measured. The data set is 158, 155, 164, 155, and 168 centimeters. We want to find the mean, median, mode, and range of this data set. First, let's rearrange the data to go from least to greatest. We'll get 155, 155, 158, 164, and 168. To calculate the mean, first add these numbers together to get a total of 800. Then divide the result by the number of students measured, which is 5. This gives us a calculated mean of 160. The median is the middle number in our organized data set, which is 158. The mode is the most frequent number, which here is 155. And our range is equal to 168, the highest number, minus 155, the smallest, which equals 13.
Starting to feel like these skills are in your range? No? Okay, fine. I get it. You're here for my brilliant testing knowledge, not my terrible jokes. In that case, let's move on to competency 3. The third competency in domain 1 is patterns, algebra, and functions. This covers recognizing patterns in number sequences and using your understanding of patterns to make predictions. You'll also need to recognize functions and use algebra to solve real-world problems. Since there are 2 mentions of patterns in the description for this competency, let's focus there. Another, more math-specific name for a pattern is a sequence. A sequence is a list of numbers, shapes, or symbols that go in a specific order. So in general, we're looking at 3 types of sequences here. First up, you've got arithmetic sequences, and these are usually the easiest to figure out. They have a common difference between terms, meaning you add or subtract the same number every time you go from one term to the next. In this example, we add 5 to get from one term to the next. Then you've got geometric sequences. These are a little trickier, but you can handle it. In these, you need to either multiply or divide by the same number to go from one term to the next. In this example, we multiply by 3 each time. And then you've got the trickiest one. And I think they were trying to be funny because they even named them complex patterns. In a complex pattern, you're going to have to identify 2 separate patterns. So, looking at the number sequence 6, 2, 7, 3, 8, and so on, to go from 6 to 2, you have to subtract by 4. Then when we go up to 7, you need to add 5, and you go back and forth between these 2 actions. Subtract 4, add 5, subtract 4, and so on. Now that's just one piece of this competency. To see everything you need to know to be successful on the test, subscribe to the study guide. Are you guys ready to move on to competency 4? Let's do it. The 4th competency is geometry and measurement. It covers a basic understanding of shapes and how they relate to each other. So you'll see things like similar and congruent shapes and how to calculate area and perimeter. It also covers using appropriate measuring tools and converting between measurement systems. There's a lot to unpack in this one, but one thing you're likely to see on the exam is similar shapes. Shapes are similar when they have congruent angle measures and number of sides, but different overall size. When shapes are similar, you can relate them to each other in order to find missing side lengths. Now I know you probably want to see an example of this, right? So let's head over to the study guide.
The 2 triangles here are similar. Let's find the length of the missing side, x. First, we'll draw the outline of a proportion, 2 equal fractions, inside of a rectangle. Label the left side of the rectangle with 2 different shapes. On the top of the rectangle, label the first fraction side A and the second fraction side B. In the first fraction, place the value of side A of each of the shapes, making sure the labels to the left correspond appropriately. In the second fraction, write the known amount of side B. Then place an X for the unknown amount. Then once again, cross-multiply and divide to solve for X.
Like what you saw? There's a ton more videos where that came from. We finished math, now let's head over to science. The first competency in science is life science. So you're going to need to know the characteristics and life processes of different organisms and how to classify them. You're also going to need to know how they reproduce, what their life cycles look like, and how they interact with the environment. That's not a lot, right? Now I know that's a lot, but that's okay, because we're going to pinpoint one of these and zoom in on it. Let's dive into characteristics of organisms, specifically adaptations, which are the traits that improve functions and better equip organisms for survival. There are 2 types of adaptations an organism can have: structural and behavioral. Structural adaptations are physical features that help an organism survive. Think a bird species that develops a different beak shape that makes it easier to get food, or a coat color that helps an animal blend in with their environment. Behavior adaptations are things that organisms do naturally, usually to avoid harm. like when a skunk sprays scent for protection or a bird migrates to avoid cold temperatures. And if you need a little more help with this, stick around to the end of the video. We just might have some questions about adaptations. Now let's keep cruising through Domain 2. The next competency is a double whammy. They lumped physical science and earth and space science together. So this covers matter, energy, waves, the solar system, tectonic plates, earth systems, and resources available on Earth. Whoa. Now while we can't cover every concept on physical science and earth and space now, we'll pick one essential topic that you'll need to know for your exam and zoom in on it. Now remember, if you want more, you can subscribe to our 240 study guide. We cover all the needs to know so that you can feel confident that you'll pass your exam. Okay, let's get into the movement of the solar system, specifically eclipses. I have just a thing to show you. Let's take a peek inside the study guide.
Solar eclipses have the moon in the middle and affect the way the sun looks. Think solar equals sun. Lunar eclipses have the earth in the middle and affect the way the moon looks. Think lunar equals moon.
That preview was just a glance at what we have to offer, and we're so confident in our study guides that we offer a money-back guarantee. Now let's wrap up science with our last competency. Competency 7 covers the nature of science, which is basically a way of grouping the general scientific practices together. These will apply no matter what branch of science you're studying. You'll need to understand and apply the scientific method, collecting and measuring data, and how science relates to the other subjects. You'll also need to recognize unifying themes that run between all branches of science, like systems and the relationships between form and function. Now I know that sounds like a lot, but the biggest thing to pay attention to is the scientific method. Need to brush up on those steps a little bit? Let's look at a chart from our study guide so we can break those down. Students start by identifying a problem, then they make observations about the problem. Next, they form a hypothesis, design and conduct an experiment, record the data they've collected during the experiment, and finally, they draw conclusions. Often, scientists use their conclusions to modify their hypothesis and design a whole new experiment. Here's another tip. You're likely to see questions on how to best implement each of these steps, not just what they are. So make sure you know how to write a proper hypothesis and set up an experiment. We have plenty more where that came from in the study guide. But for right now, let's dive into the last competency. You're doing great, we're almost to the finish line. We've only got one more domain and one competency left, the arts, health, and fitness. You heard me correctly, all of that is shoved into one competency. So for the art part, you need to know the elements associated with music, drama, dance, and art, and recognize art as communication and self-expression. For PE, you'll need to understand the basic structures and functions of the human body and understand how to maintain a physically, mentally, and emotionally healthy body. Let's focus on health for now. It's important to understand the nutrition needed to maintain a healthy body. The United States FDA's current dietary guidelines use the My Plate image to show the relative portion sizes of each type of food for a balanced meal. But like I said, that's just one piece of a pretty broad competency. But we've got that all mapped out for you in our study guide. Now that was our last competency, and you know what that means. It's question time. Let's start at the beginning with Domain 1 and mathematics. Let's take a look at a question about place value. What is the digit in the hundreds place in the product of 63 times 31? The first step here is to actually do the math. So 63 times 31 equals 1,953. So the answer here is D. The digit that occupies the hundreds place is 9. Time for a question about converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. What percent is represented by the shaded area of the decimal square? First, we need to figure out what fraction of the figure is shaded. There are 100 total squares and 24 of them are shaded, which will give us a fraction of 24 over 100, which is equal to 24%. Great, let's look at a measure of central tendency problem. The number of inches of snowfall in Selbyville is graphed in the bar chart below. What is the mean number of inches of snowfall per month from November to March? To find the mean, we need to add up all values and then divide by the number of values in the data set. So 5 plus 7 plus 9 plus 8 plus 1 equals 30. There are 5 data points, so 30 divided by 5 gives us 6. So this one is correct. Next up in this sequence of questions is a question on sequences. Which of the sequences below is arithmetic? An arithmetic sequence is one where the same amount is added or subtracted from each term to the next. The only one that meets this criteria is B. This sequence has a constant difference of 4 since each term is 4 more than the preceding term, making it an arithmetic sequence. All right, we're cruising right along. Next stop on the math train is similar shapes. A 6-foot tall person stands 40 feet from a tree and casts an afternoon shadow of 10 feet. His shadow reaches to the end of the shadow cast by the tree. Since we know the length of both shadows, we can build half of our proportion. The man's shadow was 10 feet long and the tree's shadow was 40 feet long. Wait, hold up. Did you catch my mistake? The problem told us that both shadows end at the same place. So this means that the tree's shadow is 40 feet long plus another 10 feet, which gives it 50 feet. Okay, so we can use our 10-foot shadow and our 50-foot shadow to build one half of the proportion. So right away, A and B can both be eliminated because they don't have 10 and 50 together in a fraction. Next, we know the man is 6 feet tall, but we don't know the height of the tree, so H. Here's where it gets tricky. Since the man's measurements are 6 feet tall and a 10-foot shadow, those two numbers need to match up. So choice C is the best. 6 and 10 are both denominators of their fractions. Domain 1, done. Now let's hop off the math train and switch tracks to science. On to domain 2. Remember when we talked about adaptations? Bears are warm-blooded animals that have fur and thick claws. They also hibernate in the winter. What is the hibernation behavior an example of? This is definitely an adaptation. And since we're dealing with something that the animal does instead of a trait the animal has, B is best. An adaptation helps an organism survive, and a bear naturally hibernating is an example of a behavior adaptation. Now we're in the combo of physical and earth science. I know we talked about eclipses before, but how about I show you one that brings in physical science too? Ooh, conduction, convection, and radiation comes up a lot here. How does heat from the sun travel to the earth? Now right away we can cross off photosynthesis. That's a process done by plants to create sugar that can be used as energy. The sun warms the planet by sending heat in the form of electromagnetic waves. This means radiation is the best answer. Alright, one more from the science competency, the scientific method. A student performed an experiment on 3 different types of paper towels. Each of the towels was soaked in a separate beaker, each containing 20 milliliters of water for exactly 15 seconds. The towels were removed. What steps should be next in the procedure in order to accurately identify the paper towel that absorbed the most water? There is only one answer here that allows us to get a measurable difference in our paper towels, which is super important whenever you're conducting an experiment. Choice A is correct. To accurately compare the paper towel absorption, the amount of water remaining in each of the beakers must be measured and compared after removing the soaking paper towels. Competency 2, check. We just got one more to go. Now your last question is coming to you from the health department. I mean, I'm not going to grade you on how clean your restaurant is or anything, but if I were, I bet you'd pass with flying colors, which coincidentally is the same way we think you'll pass your test as long as you use the 240 study guide. Which of the following is a key component of living a healthy lifestyle? Adequate water, nutrition, and exercise, increasing the amount of stationary activities, reducing the amount of sleep, or encouraging all citizens to engage in the same amount of exercise daily? The best answer is A. Adequate water, nutrition, and exercise are key components of a healthy lifestyle. And that's it. We practiced the questions from every competency on the NES Elementary Education Subtest II. Congrats on finishing the video. If you found it helpful, give it a like. 240 has helped thousands of teachers pass their certification exams, and we want to help you. So take the next step and subscribe to the 240 study guides. They have hours of video so you can watch or listen as you please. It is tested line so you know precisely what you need to study. And we have hundreds of practice questions so you can be sure that you're ready for the test. And best of all, there's a money-back guarantee. So click the link below right now and get started.